Good morning from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. I might bring you in a bit closer. It's 11:13 on the 7th of October 2023. I haven't had a great deal of sleep, but I woke about, I think it was about 10 o'clock, 9:30, 10 o'clock-ish, something like that. And I only got to sleep about 5-ish, 4 or 5-ish. Anyway, I've decided to make this video my usual post-dancing analysis or debrief or sharing my life with you all on YouTube, because why not? What else could I do to derive meaning from my rather ignoble, pathetic existence on planet Earth? Maybe not quite so ignoble. So I had a wonderful night last night. My favourite band, Alter Egos, were playing, and it was mostly young people again last night. I think I was one of the oldest people in the room, which is a little bit it's a little bit weird, but it is what it is, you know. I noticed all the old guard that had been, you know, weird with me the first time I went to Brooklyn Standard haven't been back since I went there about 6 weeks ago. So that's a bit confronting. They'll probably all realise, well, she's left the casino, and they're probably decamped over there now to create mayhem and havoc and cause shit over there and, you know, alienate other women from that scene. It's probably their agenda. I'd like to think better of them, but, you know, past history has proved otherwise. So anyway, never mind. It was mainly young people last night, but I had a lovely time. The younger women were actually friendly last night. I wore a beautiful dress that my daughter gave me about 6 months ago. I haven't worn it yet, and I thought, oh, it's time to wear it. And it's lacy, black lace with navy blue sort of satin underneath dress with lace, so that comes down to a V at the front and the back. It was a bit of a nuisance because I wore my snake bracelet with, you know, the forked tongue, and the toggle kept catching in my lace. So that was, I mustn't wear things that catch in lace when I wear lace. I keep doing it, and it's annoying because it's been half the night untangling myself, you know. It's quite bizarre. But apart from that, I did look lovely, and I had nice lacy looking tights, and I wore my bikie boots only because I wanted to wear very feminine, lovely, beautiful shoes I bought, but they're too high, and I thought, I can't dance all night in high-heeled shoes. I'm going to be crippled. So on went my bikie boots, because they've got a slight heel, but they're comfortable, and they're also well broken, and after, you know, I've been wearing them for a few years now. I've even had them repaired, so the bikie boots didn't quite go with the lovely feminine lacy dress, but I didn't care. Anyway, so yeah, the women were very friendly. I went to the loo, and there was a young Maori woman. She said, oh, you look fabulous. And I had my cross shoulder, you know, my shamanic turquoise blue leather bag with all the fringes. She said, I saw you with all your tassels dancing. And I'm looking at it, tassels. For a moment, I couldn't think what she was talking about, but she meant my fringed bag. So she said, yeah, I saw you rocking out, having a good time. And she was a very friendly young lady, and she sat at the table with me and, you know, with a group of people that were there. And yeah, very nice young lady. Then later on in the evening, she said to me, oh, you're a New Zealander, so am I. And I smiled, and I said, yes. So she was a nice lass. And there was another young girl when I was coming out of the toilet, putting on my lipstick. she was also very friendly and told me I looked beautiful. And so people were happy and congenial and pleasant, and that's what you want when you go out, you know. None of this crunching on your foot stuff and pushing you in the queue and just being uncivilized. So I was happy about that. So the uncivilized thing happened towards the end of the night when there was a brawl. So because there was like drunk men always pile in on a brawl, right? Because they're drunk and they all want to be part of the excitement. So I found myself grabbing some guy on his biceps and pulling him back and going, stay out of it. Because they were moving like a swallow murmuration, and I could see somebody being really badly hurt, and the security guard had dived in doing his job, but he was only a very not petite, but short guy, and he was the only one, and there was like 20 of them, and I was like, well, I can't dive in because I'll get pulverized, so I just pulled people out, tried to pull men out from the back, like get them out of the melee and try and diffuse the situation, which probably wasn't helping really, but I did the right thing, you know, like try and keep myself safe, but also stop it from escalating even further. Honestly, I don't even know what the brawl was about. It was a very nice man that had been dancing beside me most of the night, hadn't bothered anyone. He was just in his own space dancing, hadn't tried to even engage with me or hit on me. He was a very nice man. I think it's terrible he got attacked and beaten up by some maniac. Probably all he did was lean back too much or bump someone and it flipped, you know. I had a couple of things where one young woman pushed her shoulder back, but she wasn't doing it maliciously like what's been going on in previous weeks. I must have been looking down and she leaned back like that, and she actually clocked me with the back of her shoulder, and she had a bony shoulder because she was skinny, and well, not skinny, but very slim, you know. And so I actually put my hand up to push her off, and then not to hit her, but just to fend her off. And she turned just as I had my hand up, and I said, oh, no, I'm sorry. I said, I've just put my hand up, I said, in a reactive thing. I said, because you just smacked me in the head with your shoulder. And she went, what? And then she goes, oh, I understand you reacting. I said, I'm not going to hit you. I said, I'm just, you know, trying to fend you off. I said, you didn't realise I was so close behind you. And she was so lovely. She said, I'm so sorry. I should be more self-aware. Yes, you should, because it's crowded in there. What were you doing spinning out bloody... Anyway, doesn't matter. I know it wasn't malicious what she did. I could see she was genuinely, you know, contrite. She said, how can I make it better for you? And I was like, it's okay. I said, I just immediately reacted. I said, but, you know, I wasn't going to hurt you or anything. I was just letting you know that I'm here. And she was like, oh, and so she twirled me around a couple of times, which I thought was hilarious. And there was, so there was that, and there was another young lady later on, very elegantly dressed, beautiful evening dress, but it came split quite high. She was quite drunk actually, but she came dancing beside me, and one young man turned to me and said, is that your daughter? And I said, no, she's not my daughter. My daughter wouldn't be caught dead with me in public in a club or a pub, or the casino. She's never ever gone out with me in public in the night, in the night scene. You know, which says more about her than it does about me, because other young women are proud to dance beside me and think I'm kind of cool, you know. So anyway, so the funny thing was, this young man said, is that your daughter? I said, no. And he says, well, you look so alike. And then I sort of had a good look at her. And we did. She could have passed for my daughter. We did look quite similar. And then she turned to me and asked me if I came from the Hyperdome, which spun me out a bit. I said, no, love. I said, but funnily enough, I did used to live down that way many, many years ago. And she nodded. So I had a couple of people that thought they knew me. Another young man earlier in the night asked me if I worked at the Caxton Legal Centre. I said, no, what happens at the Caxton Legal Centre? He said, oh, Marie was talking to you. I thought she knew you from her work. And I was like, Marie must have been the young woman he was with. all she sort of said was hello, you know. Anyway, it was strange. But anyway, so there was that. But the brawl at the end of the night was a bit confronting, but, you know, no harm, no foul, except for the poor man that was in the middle of it got attacked. But that happens, and it happens in pubs and clubs. So, I mean, that's the risk you take when you go out being wild. So, but anyway, when I first arrived at the Brooklyn Standard, I was sitting down, having my drink, you know, quietly musing, just looking around at people and just drinking, wasn't dancing. I was waiting for Alter Egos to start because the other band that I was on had just finished just as I arrived, and, you know, that they're swapping the equipment over and that. So that's what was going on. I was having my drink and I was just sitting quietly. And this delightful young man approached me and he said, put his beer up against my glass, and we toasted each other. And he sat down, started chatting to me. Well, it spun me out a bit, actually, because he was just so lovely and effusive and friendly and warm. And he was a bit of a sweetheart, you know. He was a nice-looking young man, far too young for me. So anyway, so he proceeds to tell me, he said, are you having a good night? And I said, oh yes, I said, my night's just begun, but so far it's okay. And he was like, oh, that's good. And then kind of very effusively he says to me, oh, he said, I love the flower in your hair, because I always wear a big flower and tuck my hair back so that I can, if I get hot and sweaty at the end of the night, put my hair up and have it tucked out the way, you know. There's a reason why I have my regalia. Everything has a double purpose. So anyway, I said, oh, thank you, that's so nice. And he's looking at me and goes, oh, he says, and your makeup, your eyeshadow, he said, oh, you're so colourful and you look so lovely. And he says, my goodness, he said, I'm gay, he said, which he didn't give off a gay vibe at all. My radar must be a bit off, because I did not pick up for being gay. And he said, I'm gay. He said, but if I weren't gay, he said, you're so appealing. And I said to him, I said, are you sure you're not gay? Because you've got all the lines, baby. And he's just looking at me. He's like, he was an outrageous flirt, this young man. And then he proceeds to tell me again how appealing I am and how lovely I am. He goes, and you look so colourful. And I'm thinking, it's odd that he said that, because I was wearing this, you know, black and navy dress with black tights, black boots. The only thing really colourful was my eye makeup, you know. So it struck me as a bit odd. Has he been sussing me out before? Has someone sent him to tune me up a bit, you know? I was a little bit suspicious. So I just kind of said, oh, yes, I said, and you seem really lovely too. And he said something. We chatted for a little bit longer, then he said, oh, my name's Isaac. What's yours? I said, oh, Tanya. And he looks at me. I can't even remember how he came out with it. It was very odd. Something about, do you have children, along those lines? I said, yes, I've got children. And he went, really? And I went, yes. I said, one's almost 38 and one's 36. And he looked at me and went, oh, so my age? And he just kind of looked surprised. And I was like, yep, you're aged, my darling. And he said, oh. And I'm not even sure how it was a very odd, that's why I'm making this video, I'm trying to work it out. It was a very strange conversation I had with this young man. I think he was either a bit intuitive or he was a plant to tune me up, because he just had this funny way about knowing things about me that he couldn't possibly know, just little things. Anyway, so then he says to me, you're a very strong woman. And I said, oh, am I? He's probably made that judgment call, and the fact that I go out alone, you know, to the club, and I go home alone, and I'm always alone. They're probably thinking, well, she's brave, you know. Anyway, then he said something to me about, I can't remember how the subject of religion came up. I said, oh, it's my Wild Friday night. I said, I'm Jewish. He went, really? He said, but it's the Shabbat. I said, oh, are you Jewish? He said, no. He said, I'm actually raised Jehovah's Witness. So I looked at him, because it's even unusual for Jehovah's Witness to know about the Shabbat. So I thought, it's a bit tuned in, this boy, he's a bit aware, you know. I said to him, yes, I said, I used to be very, very religious back in the day. And I said, but now I go out wildly dancing on the Shabbat and have a wonderful old time. And he was like, oh, that's so interesting. And I said, and Isaac, I said, is a Jewish name. I said, it's the son of Abraham. And he went, yes, it is. He says, but I'm not Jewish. And mentioned again that he was gay. And I went, yes, that's fine. I said, you're completely off the menu, darling. I said, you're gay, and also you're far, far too young for me. I said, you could be my son. So he buried his head in my on my chest, but in a sweet kind of sunny Jim way. But then his hand went to roam on my leg, and I went, remember that you're gay, darling. And even he had to giggle, you know. So he was a sweetheart, but he proceeded to tell me, it was a bit inappropriate, really, that he told me this. But, you know, drunk people, I suppose they come out with things. I come out with things, I have no filters, and I'm sober usually, so I do it too. But anyway, he said, oh yes, he said, I was raised a Jehovah's Witness. He said, I was a terrible, terrible mistake. I said, whatever do you mean? He said, oh, well, my mother was a heroin addict when she fell pregnant with me. And I went, oh, dear God. I said, oh, that's terrible, darling. And he says, well, no, yes and no. He said, because although I was a mistake, he said, it turned my mother's life around, and she got off heroin, and she became a Jehovah's Witness, and she raised me in that religion. And I said, okay, well, that's good. You know, that was good for you, really, to have that, you know, safe upbringing. And he said, yes, it was all very good, he said, until I came out as gay. And, you know, the church told my mother she had to either cut me out of her life or leave the church. So she left the church. So I smiled at him and I said, your mother did absolutely the right thing. I said, because my religion is love, and love is love, and a mother should always put her children first before any religion. And I said, you have a very good mother, and I'm very proud of her for choosing you, even though you're gay, choosing you over the religion. I said, a religion that wants to divide and conquer a mother and a child, it's no religion in my book. And he looked at me and he smiled happily. He said, oh, thank you. He said, I'm so happy you feel that way too. He said, that's how I look at it too, that my mother chose me, and I'm very grateful and happy that she did. And I said, that's good. I said, because God looks down on all of these things, and God does see all of it. And I said, I'm quite sure on my own heart and mind that God would be, you know, choosing that, wanting your mother to choose you over and above any man-made doctrines. And he agreed. And then it hit me kind of really hard, actually, because when I was raising my babies and my young children in Orthodox and Reformed Judaism, I raised them mainly in Reformed Judaism because I was converted to Reformed Judaism. But then I had a year when I was attempting an Orthodox conversion, and the pressure to put the religion over and above my children was intense, you know. By the time they turned 12, 13, they even tried, my former congregation tried to prevent Crystal's bat mitzvah from going ahead, based on the fact that I couldn't afford the bat mitzvah fees, and really discriminatory and really evil. And my rabbi had to go in to fight for me. It was just appalling how we were treated. So bit by bit, I relinquished my once powerful affiliation to Judaism, to my religion of choice that I had loved and had indeed put over and above even my children at times. And I have cause to regret that, And I suppose it cost me my relationship with Jasmine too, but there's lots of things that cost me my relationship with Jasmine. And a lot of it wasn't all my fault, like she had choices in how she wanted to behave towards me, and how she feels towards me. There were choices on both sides. But anyway, I sat there musing and quite a little bit of contemplative sort of heartache, about how we put faith in God and in our communities and our tribes and our cults. Jehovah's Witness is a cult, and to a certain degree so is Reform and Orthodox Judaism. When you get enmeshed in a community, especially a toxic one, it becomes cultish. It really does. And I sat there thinking, all these years, so many years. I converted to Judaism when I was 19 years and 1 month. Well, actually, I was 19 years old. It was a month before my wedding, which got thrown together very quickly and brought forward because of my father-in-law dying. So I'm sure had that not been the case, and the engagement would have been left to the, 6 months later, I would not have married that man. I'm quite sure I would have had the discernment by then to realise he was completely unsuitable. But they got me when I was very young and very vulnerable and malleable and desperate to have a family and a safe place to call my own, and a community and a tribe of my own. And I was just kind of moulded like putty, like Play-Doh, and pushed and squeezed and pressurized until eventually my mind just went snap, and I had no choice but to get out of the marriage. And I didn't leave Reform and Orthodox. I didn't leave Judaism. It took probably another 10, 15 years before I eventually walked away from that, and I haven't completely. I went to the cemetery the other day, Mount Gravatt Cemetery, the Jewish cemetery, and was distressed to see that one young member of our community has died very young, 29 years old, a pilot, and sudden and unexpectedly, which means it was as a direct consequence of this. Not that they've made much, not that they made that obvious, but you don't need a research scientific degree to work that out. And then another member of that congregation, one who had actually been highly abusive to me and inappropriate in Kabbalah classes, has also passed away, but he was 80. He had a good innings, that man. He had very poor health when I was doing Kabbalah classes with him 20 odd years ago. We're talking, 21, 22 years ago. He had a very swollen lymph nodes and edema in his legs, and he was diabetic. So he did very well to survive to 80. His protege, my ex-lover David Davidson, who haunted me when he died, was feeding him homeopathics too, and it must have worked because the old man lasted another 20 years, whereas his protege died 7 years ago now. So, yes, it is 7 years. It was in 2016. So I stood in front of his grave, Emmanuel Mesh's grave, and I said, had the Freemason symbol because he was always on about how he was a Freemason. Didn't make him a nice, respectable, decent man, how he treated me in classes and degraded me, and it was vicious. I have not forgotten. They say you should not speak ill of the dead, but the truth remains the truth, dead or alive, in my book. So I stood in front of his grave and I said, well, here you are, Emmanuel, 80 years old, you did well. You lived a long life, you prospered, you did well. And you can take pride in that wherever you are now with the Ein Sof Or. I said, but I have not forgotten how rotten you were towards me to protect the interests of, your protege, my ex-lover, and his then girlfriend whom he later married. I have not forgotten the viciousness. That will go down with me to Valhalla. I have not forgotten. So I don't know, maybe it was my imagination, but I stood there, 5 or 6 minutes. I didn't grieve, I wasn't grief-stricken. I didn't feel any particular hatred. I just thought, there you are. After all the viciousness and all the humiliation and all the degradation, you get a beautiful marble grave and tombstone edifying what a wonderful man you were, mentioning all the grandchildren that love you. So, and I'm quite sure he often did speak lovingly of his kids and grandkids, so he managed to not fuck that relationship up. But, or did he? One never knows the truth behind the facade, But anyway, I just stood there you go, there you are, and I'm probably not that far behind you. And all this hatred and malevolence and dystopian, nightmarish, traumatic stuff ultimately dissipates like dust. Dust to dust, ashes to ashes, am I right? And, all the potential of the other beautiful young man who should have been a husband and a father, or at very least a partner and a lover at some stage in the future, and father children, that was stolen from him by our COVID epoch. And the old got old and died, although one does wonder, he died, and both those men died on the same day, 8th of April 2022, which I'm sure was just a coincidence, but it struck me as a bit odd, I was very ill last year in 2022, very ill. In fact, I thought I was dying with my chest. So what makes me wonder now, in a way, because it was not long after Mesh's died that I was struck down with a very bad illness. And it does make me wonder, because sometimes my body will psychically react to psychic attacks on me in a somatic, physical way. And it's not the first time that I've had a serious illness come on when one of my enemies has recently died, or in Davidson's case, I wasn't ill, but he actually fully haunted me for 4 days. And so I'm thinking about it now. I must go through my diaries, through my journals, and see what headspace or what ill health I was circling at that exact point in time. It just as a point of interest, because Emmanuel Mesh's was claimed to be a powerful Kabbalist, but he was a dark one. He was very dark. he hid it well. I mean, he had the rabbi's ear, and the rabbi would call him in the middle of the night and ask him for advice. And he was well regarded in our Jewish community, you know. But the way he treated me was profoundly evil. So I know from personal experience that he was a dark Kabbalist, and he was therefore capable of doing me great harm upon his passing and being in that limboic stage, 12 months it takes before you get a headstone. Those evil souls that attach themselves to you can create quite a bit of havoc in those traditionally 11 months till they get their headstone. So I'm not saying definitely that he's been the cause of my great misfortune, but it's been a strange year, you know. This year has been very fraught with, you know, being told to go home and die in January by the hospital when I presented with my failing bladder, which had been going on at that point in time for months, well actually a couple of years, but it got very bad from about September last year. And you know, being kicked out more or less out of the casino, by being told I'm not good enough and devalued and abused and sullied and othered and trashed by low-level entities. That's not an accident, people. It's not just indicative of the zeitgeist of our times, which is malevolent and anti-humanist and disrespecting the elders and women on their own and the marginalised and people like me, right? It's not just that, it's spiritual as well. It's been Beauregard's death in August, you know, that was so evil and perverted and sadistic. It was a full-blown, not just the fact that my poor little boy was dying, but it was a full-blown psychic attack piled on when I was vulnerable and grieving and distressed. I'm fully cognizant of that. So I fought through all of that, all of it. And then I go to the cemetery and find out, you know, one of my enemies is dead, of old age. Good on him. You know, I probably won't make old bones because they wore me down and ground me down. Ground and ground and ground and ground to the point I cracked my own teeth with my own TMJ joints from the constant trauma and distress and anxiety and fear and horror that I endured with so many members of that former community that were in collusion with Davidson and my mother and Buck, which is even more heinous considering that my mother and Buck weren't Jewish. You know, they were so happy to be the handmaidens of hell, to pile on like Dipplekeen and vilify me for holding my ground, for living my best life, and for, even though I no longer pray in synagogues or temples, I no longer keep a kosher home, and I dance wildly on the Shabbat, on Erev Shabbat, on the night, Friday night, I still keep God in here where God belongs, tucked away in here. They couldn't turn me rotten like them with all their lip service to the Holy One, davening every Friday night, Saturday morning, handing me $5, here, buy some lollies for your children, like I was some filthy whore, treated in the most condescending, patronising way by that man. I have not forgotten. I will never forget. If I choose to forgive one day, and it will be by my will and my choice, so be it. But there they are, laid out, resplendent in their marble tombs, thinking they got away with it all, but now they are called before the great master, the grandest master of them all, source, field, creator, the Ein Sof all. Here's $5, little girl, while I disparage you about your vagina in front of all my friends and students, and oh, it was malevolent what they did to me, utterly malevolent. But so this young man mentioning in passing that his mother had chosen him and left the Jehovah's Witness, that was actually a very brave thing for his mother to do, leaving the safety net of that religion, because it had given her, I suppose, a life where she was able to have her child and get off drugs and replace one addiction with another, which was God-bothering. And, you know, I wanted a safe haven, and that's partly why I wanted to be a Jew from a very young age, 12 years of age. I did the same. I wanted to belong to a culture and a community that would fully embrace me and my children and respect us and treat us with honour and integrity. And all I got, by and large, was shit, which is why I dance joyously and shamanically now and hold my own in the darkest of spaces, because I have lived in what was supposed to be the light to the nations, a pure and sweet and, you know, loving tribe. I have lived that horror, that malfeasant horror, for decades. That's not to say that everyone in my former Jewish community is evil and rotten. You know, there are good people who have been loving and kind and supportive of me, who do treat me with kindness and honour and buoy me up, both financially and emotionally, still to this day on Facebook and in person when they can. Some of them live overseas, have gone back to New Zealand. But there are good people too. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it was all evil and rotten. There were a few good people that stepped up the mark, that tried to put the brakes on that runaway loose caboose that was the Brisbane Jewish community. You know, it's interesting. My daughter joined a Facebook group that I actually, when she told me about it, I kind of smirked at her, because I actually left that group because of the high level of toxicity. So I won't name the group, but if you're a Brisbane person, you can guess which one I'm talking about. So anyway, so she joined it and tried to promote her play, because, you know, she grew up in this community. She was educated in this community at Sinai College. You know, she belongs, whether they like it or not. My daughter belongs. She earned her right and privilege to belong, you know. And so did I, by the way. I mean, I've walked away by choice, but not really all that willingly. I was harried and bullied and systemically abused for decades, till I kind of had no choice but to leave, really. So, but anyway, my daughter joined this group to promote her recent play that she'd produced, hoping that, you know, people that she knew from Beitar, and which is a Jewish youth group here, and other, you know, other people of her age group, or well, anybody in the community might come and want to see her play. Since they educated her, she thought they would take an interest in, you know, supporting her play, which they did many years ago when she was younger, when she was in Rocky Horror Picture Show, and they did support several of the plays she performed in. But this one was a bit special because she was producing it herself, so I think she wanted to show them her progression and her, her extreme talent. So she said to me, so I reached out to this group and I advertised my play through it. And she said, and all I got was crickets. And then one man who actually doesn't even live in Australia contacted her, and I forget where she said he lives. I think she said Seattle, Washington, but I might be wrong. But I'm sure he's in America. And he actually messaged her, and he said, your play looks really interesting, and it's like it was about dating, based in London, about dating, and it's a kind of a last hurrah trying to find a partner before it's too late kind of thing when you're in your 30s and pushing 40s, which I thought was imitating life actually. Hello, since my daughter's nearly 38 on the 6th of November. Happy birthday, Crystal, by the way. So I'm laughing because we've had a fight and we're not talking, so I can only wish her happy birthday via my crazy videos, right? There's tragedy and comedy in it, but anyway, I'll deal with that heart schmetz. It'll dissipate into the ether like dust, like everything else does eventually. But anyway, I digress. So this young man, her age group, maybe I think he's a little bit older, had contacted her, and he said to her, I would love to come and support your play, but he said, I'm coming to Brisbane, I think she said in January or February, and he said, so I'm not in the city yet, but he said, I'm really looking forward to coming to Brisbane. And he said, I've been following this group, and he said, I've been trying to connect up with people, hoping to make friends like online before I arrive. He said, but he goes, what's wrong with the Jewish community in Brisbane? He said they're so unfriendly and aloof and unwelcoming. And she says, Mummy, she said, you were right all along. She said, this young man has found it very difficult. And I said, tell him, this is because when we were, talking, I said, tell him when he comes that he has a friend in you. You will make him welcome. You will show him around Brisbane and show him all the, things he needs to find, for Jewish life in Brisbane, which is very, very hard to do now since they're so almost exclusive, closed brethren now. It's actually obscene what's happened to our community. So anyway, I said, tell him that, and if he wishes, I said, he's welcome in my home anytime, even though I'm not kosher. And she says, oh no, he's not worried about keeping kosher. He just wanted to make contacts with, Jews in Brisbane. And he plans to study here at the university and live here for a few years. And he was wanting to build a network up, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's perfectly acceptable when you go to a new country. You want to, find a safe landing. I said, tell him he's welcome to come here with you anytime he likes, and, have a safe landing here. I said, if he's not judgmental about me not being a religious Jew anymore. And my daughter looked at me and she said, oh, that's really lovely of you, Mum. And I said, no, that's the Jewish way. It's called hospitality. It's actually one of the main tenets of our religion is hospitality and welcoming the stranger in your midst, especially someone from your own religious background who wants to come to a new country and, network and find a space for himself. I said, there is nothing wrong with that. I said, it's actually obscene that he's been excluded or made to feel like, who are you and what do you want kind of thing, when it's a fellow Jew. Actually a disgrace and an obscenity. So she looked at me and she said, yes, I think so too. And, I thought back on it really. Many years ago, when I first came to Brisbane in 1988, the Jewish community was a bit weird even back then, but they were a lot more warm and welcoming. You know, they would have, like, towards me, they were a bit weird. I remember going to, in those days it was called Temple Shalom, and would have been very late in 1988 because we arrived in August, and they were like, said to me, well, who are you and where do you come from and are you even Jewish? And I had to produce my conversion certificate to prove that I was Jewish, right? Which is okay, that's pro forma. When you go to any synagogue, you have to prove that you're Jewish, either born Jewish or converted Jewish. And you know, there's no harm in that. I mean, to become a member of a synagogue or temple, there's no harm in that per se. But I remember this guy who was, I won't name him, but he was so obnoxious. He was a lecturer in sporting education or something at the UQ University, and he was an academic, and he thought he was so fucking. I've never forgotten that man. It's funny how you remember people for their nastiness more than for their good deeds. And anyway, he was like, and so he talked to me like, and like I was some kind of dirty rag, you know. And I said to him, oh, you know, because I was so innocent and young then. I migrated here when I was 23 with 2 babies and my husband, and I still had baby brain, and I just would fall into these traps because I've always been forthright and honest and have authenticity and integrity. I've always been decent, always. Even as a young girl. So, you know, I said, oh, you know, I've come from New Zealand and migrated here, and you're in New Zealand. And treated me like he was just appalling, this man. Never forgotten him, never. Whereas he now drifted off, as people do, with their viciousness. Scum never stays very long, remember that. They always drift off to trash out someone else's sphere of activity or life force, or, you know, that's the way it goes. Scum never stays in one place very long. So there's great power in holding your ground and not letting bullies grind you down, or as I say, not letting the bastards grind me down. So anyway, so having said that, I've segued into this conversation about, well, it's monologue really, because I'm talking to you, about my experiences with the community here. But yes, that's right. I was saying, when I arrived, they were very wary and suspicious of me, and really eking out, setting traps. What they did was entrapment. It was vicious. And then the next thing I know, I was being accused of being a Nazi because my mother's German. I mean, that viciousness went on for 2 years. It took 2 years to have a special general meeting and have the board actually clear my reputation, which was never in effect cleared because the viciousness continued behind my back for decades. Evil is what it was. But anyway, and the fury still seeks up my esophagus and lands in the back of my throat like a small pile of vomit, of bile. I can almost taste it. That's the rancor and the bitterness and the trauma they inflicted upon me and my children. But now they won't support her play and treat us like we're persona non grata. You know what? Because we were better than them. We had dignity, we had courage, we had integrity, and we held our ground. And where are they? Lying corpses at the Brisbane cemetery with their little Freemason thing on, playing holier than thou, even after death. And it's ironic, it's a bit ironic, but that it is what it is. And as I said, the great master sees all, including my fury and distress. He counts it, he's counted every tear of mine, every tear I ever cried over the abuse that I encountered in that community. Are like little diamonds in a vial in heaven somewhere, waiting for me when I ascend at my appointed time to heaven. I'm quite sure they'll be presented to me. Here's all the tears you cried over there's no good nicks and there's nothings and there's Dubric-ridden entities who called themselves religious Jews. Here's all your tears, carefully manufactured. And knowing Hashem in His infinite wisdom will probably make me build them into a beautiful necklace that I can wear as a badge of honour and integrity. My own tears and my own trauma glistening like the morning dew in the morning sunshine, blessed and sanctified. Well, that's a fantasy in my mind, isn't it? Here we are on a Shabbat, talking about dark, sad, tragic topics again, and about trauma and about horror. But anyway, as I was about to say, apart from that particular vicious lecturer in that temple and the backstabbing that went on, there were other people who did support me and were kind, like my German rabbi, himself a Holocaust survivor, and other members of that community. I visited their graves when I was there the other day. I visited all the graves, and I put a stone on all the graves. I even put a stone on Emanuel Mesh's grave. It's a mark of respect. Even though I have very bad memories of him, I remember that there were some pleasant times when I enjoyed his classes before it went toxic. And we even gifted each other a silver coin at one time, which was a bit weird. I gave him a coin. I gave him a coin because Alison Clunes had gifted me a coin with a ram on it because we're Aries. So I went and bought 2 more, and I gave one to Emmanuel as a thank you for the Kabbalah classes, and one to Davidson because, like an idiot, I was still in love with him in that time period. And that was a self-flagellating whipping and welting and splicing that went on for quite some time, up until all that viciousness in Kabbalah classes, when I realised they really were utterly monstrous individuals, not worth a scrap of my love. And that's the reality, people. But I still wear my coin, gifted to me by Alison, on my charm necklace. And I still honour the few scraps of kindness they threw my way, expecting me to gnaw on it like a wild rabid dog and extract some marrow of goodness out of that filth. I still remember the crumbs that were thrown to me, the scraps of love and attention and kindness. I still remember. And yet I still fight for my people, my Jewish people. I fought for them yesterday on a spiritual YouTube video. This woman, Tesh, does video podcasts on near-death experiences and has these spiritual bypassing, sadistic, evil, perverted monstrosities, the likes like when I befriended Linda Ray Kramer, who have the chutzpah and the audacity and the most profound evil to tell us that Auschwitz was beautiful and good for the edification of all Jewish souls, and that's why they chose to die such horrific deaths, tortured, raped, starved, beaten, enslaved, worked to death, and then gassed in the crematoria. Evil is what that was. So I told that woman on her comment section, which, by the way, I'm quite certain that comment would have been deleted either by herself or by YouTube, because I said only 80 years later we were adjured, after the camps were liberated, to never forget what was done to the Jewish people, and only 80 years later we're all forgetting. They've all chosen to forget, and they want to do this forgiveness trope and say, oh, predator and victim go round and round in a spiral from lifetime to lifetime. I'm quite sure it does. the karmic wheel. It's probably, that part's probably true. And you should just like think what a good thing it was to perish in Auschwitz or in the concentration camps, because now your soul is free. What a load of bollocks that is. I'll tell you what that is. It's a very veiled form of Nazism that is now being peddled in the spiritual, hippy-dippy alternative communities, and it is so bald and in your face and insidious and invidious, so I called out on that too. So while I have Jewish former members of my community that I abhor to the point where I'll put a little stone in their gravestone, but I'll still tell them that they were an arsehole to me, because they were. But when it comes to anti-Semites or peace-loving, vegan, cocaine-snorting maniacs peddling anti-Semitic Jew hatred, I'll arc up about that too. Because the truth remains the truth, no matter how many times you dissect it, splice it, dice it. The truth is the truth. And that too is my religion. So yes, there was a fight yesterday, because I paused. I thought, should I respond to that video that was so heinous? But it was just so veiled and glossed over. Oh, the Holocaust was terrible, but look how good it's been for the Jews. It was appalling. If I could put my fist through the screen and punch that young woman right in the kisser, I would have done so. She doesn't deserve to be in a podcast on YouTube. She doesn't deserve to be peddling such anti-Jewish and anti-humanist hate. Because, by the way, it wasn't just the Jews that perished in the concentration camps. I want you all to remember, it was the intellectually handicapped went first. They were actually exterminated usually in doctors' surgeries by nurses with a quiet little injection. That came before the machinery of the camps got started. After the intellectual handicapped, it was the Jews, the Romani people or Gypsy people. Their actual name is Romani, but Gypsy's kind of a slur, but some Gypsies still call themselves Gypsies. It's complicated people. But they were exterminated by the millions too. Homosexuals, political dissidents, communists, Jehovah's Witnesses, pacifists, anyone against the war, they all went into those camps. And then you had the political prisoners like my stepfather, Cornelis van der Graft, also known as Case, who was shipped to Nordhausen by his own Dutch government, sold as slave labour to the Nazis to work on the V1 and V2 rocket assembly line in the tunnel under the mountain Nordhausen, in the tunnel of that concentration camp called Mittelbau-Dora. So all you had to do wrong by the Nazis and the Dutch government was be an able-bodied young man deemed, who knows why, expendable by his own government. Flicked off, just like that. And let us not forget the same things happening again in plain view in modern day contemporary Australia with the COVID epoch. We're riding a very fine razor's edge of it going to complete full-blown totalitarianism and industrialised death. Well, we already have the industrialised death. except it's not happening in concentration camps with barbed wire and Alsatians and screaming Nazi officers, or, you know, not just officers but soldiers. We're in an open air prison now. And we can be in denial about it as much as we like, but that is the reality, people. But meanwhile, I dance. I dance as a defiance, and I was out dancing last night. And as I said, I had a lovely time. Except for the brawl at the end of the night, which happens, I had a lovely time. So, yes, I wanted to say, my mind doesn't even want to go there to remember the positive things that happened with my Jewish community, because it's hard. It's hard to find positivity out of all the muck and the dross that was hurled at me, like shit, staining me permanently forever. The irony. I came from the New Zealand Jewish community in Wellington, and who were warm and welcoming and loving and embracing and was so kind to me. Before, during and after my conversion, they were nothing but lovely and inclusive and loving. And if it weren't for the cold and the fact that I'd be there in dire poverty, I'd go back just for that community alone. Although that might have changed over the years, who knows. But anyway, the Brisbane Jewish community has always been problematic. You know, like this young American said to my daughter, why are they so weird? Crystal goes, I really can't explain it to you, but they've always been like that. Always. So anyway, he back in 1988, right up until round about 95, it was about between 1988 and 1995 when I left my marriage. You know, the community was a lot more welcoming to new people. I remember, because I used to participate. We used to have these big events at the Burbank Community Centre in Burbank, and we would, where the school is now. The school was built in 1990. I think it was 1990. Anyway, I remember going to these functions as a member of my then, Reform Jewish congregation, where we would welcome new arrivals to Brisbane. I was welcomed by, members of the Orthodox community that were putting on these welcoming to new immigrants, and it was lovely because they were immigrants themselves. That family came from, I think they came from Argentina, Argentinian Jews. Very friendly family. Neubauer was their name. I still remember them for their kindness and decency and making people welcome. So there you go. So it's not all darkness and horror. There were lovely things too. And so they made me and my husband and children welcome at this big party that was put on all the new immigrants. Most of the new people came from South Africa or Zimbabwe. So I made some lovely friends through that. I met long time friends. They've drifted away now too because they moved to Melbourne and became wealthy and rang me up one day and said, we're really wealthy now and blah, blah, blah. I never heard from them again. So that ended quite badly, I feel. Again, I was marginalised, like, not quite rich enough for us now, so that was awful. But I don't bear any ill will to that particular family. We were close friends for, about 15, 20 years when things drifted and unravelled away, as things do in life, Anywho, so, But yes, I remember vividly going, when I met that particular family, going to the community centre with my young children. I think I was still married to Michael. Well, yeah, I would have still been married to Michael in those days. And but he didn't come with me. I went on my own with the kids. And we sat there, and I befriended this family that had, the husband came from Zimbabwe, but his wife, that they'd migrated up from Melbourne, which isn't really migrating, you know. They'd moved from Melbourne to Brisbane, and they were looking to make friends in the Brisbane Jewish community and, you know, find a safe landing for them as well. And yeah, so we befriended each other, but those kind of afternoon soiree type things were quite lovely. You know, we'd have picnics and the kids would swim in the big swimming pool and we would play together, and there was a sense of community, you know, and it was quite lovely. So I don't know if they still do that. I haven't seen it done in many years, but then to be honest, I withdrew my participation about 5 or 6 to 10 years ago. I just gradually distanced myself. So, but yes, there's such a tight-knit and almost incestuous, clingy little group, and they're just so exclusively inclusive that they even shut out new Jewish immigrants. It's actually appalling to do that. It's a very, very poor form. So that's my video. That's my thoughts on that, prompted by this strange conversation with this very young man who was lovely. Anyway, he said to me, I'm going to dance now. Nice meeting you. And he looked at me quite warmly, and then he, you know, drifted off. I said, that's fine, you're far too young for me, darling, but come and dance with me later, you know. Which he didn't dance with me later, but he did follow me into the toilet, because the toilets are very close in Brooklyn Standard, and the men seem to automatically walk into the women's toilet, which is a bit odd, but, you know, I guess it's an honest enough mistake. So he followed me into the toilet. I turned around, he was, oh, hello, Tony. I went, Isaac, you're in the ladies' toilets. Oh, I'm just happy to see you. I said, turn around, Isaac. And I gently pushed him. I went, over there are the gents. And I pushed him in the direction. And just as I'm gently pushing him out, ushering him out, the security guard dived in behind me, because they must be conscious that the men dive into the women's, and they're worried about our safety, quite rightly so. I was a bit worried about my safety too, but I happen to have already met young Isaac and know that he wasn't being predatory. He's just gay and lost in space. So anyway, so the security guard looked at me all freaked out, and I just nodded. It's handled, he's out of here. Sent him on his way. And then a bit later on in the evening, he came, young Isaac, he came and stood near me. He was looking at me again. He was a nice, friendly fellow. I liked him. You know, he really was. He was quite harmless and sweet. So, but he didn't dance with me. But he just was dancing nearby and smiled at me, you know. So, yeah. And then Scott came up to me, you know, after the second break, like for the last set of the night, and said to me, how are you going with all these creeps and weirdos, messy people? He said, every weekend it's the same thing. I was like, I know. I said, but every weekend if I went anywhere else, it's the same everywhere, Scott. All I can do is just keep dancing and living my best life. He says, but don't they get on your nerves? And I said, oh, they do. They all drive me crazy. I said, but everyone drives me crazy. But not you, Scott. You never drive me crazy. And he's looking at me. And I went, oh, there I go. I'm flirting again. God help me. And he went, oh. And he was like, would you like a request? I said, yes. Can you please play Zombie or Desiree by Neil Diamond, because that's my middle name. I always tease them about playing Desiree. I don't think they know the song, but they do play Sweet Caroline, which is lovely. But so they get back up on the stage, him and Luke, the drummer, and they go, "We have a request," and they played Zombie for me, which I thought was lovely. So I'm moshing out to Zombie, which was very hard because I didn't have the room to do the full, I did mosh my neck a little bit, but I couldn't do the full whiplash neck thing because there was no room. And then this young drunk woman that was beside me in the very elegant dress sort of stumbled over, so then I was kind of holding her up mid-mosh. And then at one point she actually fell on the stage and fell backwards and looked quite astonished. So then I had to I didn't have to, but I chose to reef her up, try and pull her out, which was awkward because she'd fallen down. She couldn't get up because her bottom was tucked behind the equipment. I had trouble pulling her out too. But anyway, I got her out of that, and then that was fine. And then the security guard came over. I think they were going to kick her out because she was quite a bit under the weather. But she was nice to me. She was a nice woman. And so I didn't particularly want her to get kicked out, but when you're that drunk, you can't manage it. It's time to go. And then I was just processing that, thinking, oh, what a shame, because she was a nice woman. We were dancing nicely together, and I was enjoying her company. And then there was this almighty brawl, so that was that. But anyway, the band kept playing, and I kept dancing for a couple more songs. And then they finished, and I walked out and went home because I'm tired at the end of the night. So this has been a long video again, and I hope I'm not boring you. But I had a lot to think about, thinking about the community and my tribe and where I belong in this life. And it came up in my memories this morning of even date about my daughter stirring me up about hanging out in pubs and clubs and wild scene back when I was 49, and I'm 58 now. So this was 9 years ago. She was winding me up. You'll never find a boyfriend or a partner doing that. And what are you doing wearing rock t-shirts? And you're not a teenager and you're just ridiculous. And so I wrote about me telling her, that I'm happy doing what I'm doing, and it's not for her to judge. And I enjoy the dancing, and I enjoy being around, the rock bands and live music and dancing. And, apart from when they occasionally have a bit of a brawl or there's a bit of an altercation, I actually enjoy being even around other revelers. I have every right to be happy. Every right to be happy, and as I said to Scott last night, continuously live my best life. And he said to me, he was so sweet, he said, "You've got the right attitude, Tanya." He said, "But it must be very stressful." I said, "It is stressful at times. It is stressful, but, what other options do I have? Sit at home, crawl into a hole and die? No. No. And I had far more stress back in the day when I was living the respectable, kosher. For 12 months I had a kosher kitchen, Jewish lifestyle, being judged and persecuted and vilified behind my back by every man and his dog in the Jewish community had a ride. So what's different? Nothing changes if nothing changes. I'm just in a different, I just participate in a non-Jewish culture of people who are, healing themselves by going out and drinking and dancing every weekend. And, there's no harm in that, really. I'm not doing harm to anyone. I'm not wishing harm upon anyone. Enemies come, enemies go, and as I was reminded at the cemetery, we all crumble into dust eventually, and it becomes all meaningless, and just bathos, really. Bathos and pathos. It's just all the things we thought were so important, and all the bitching and backbiting that people undertook against me has served no purpose. And when I die, it'll serve no purpose either. I'll be like, who's that girl running around with you, baby? Who's that girl running around with you, honey? Well, I guess in another paradigm, I'll be Mustang Quay still. Push, push, push my energy through, running wild and free in the seventh heavens, surrounded by chariots of fire and my angel protectors, friends, lovers, kin, and riding from the great hall from Valhalla in the Viking way, or riding through the concentric circles, spiralling up, spiralling down, from the Ein Sof Or down to Malkut. It occurred to me yesterday that maybe that Ojibwa man calling me Mustang Quay might not have been a compliment at all, because if you think about it, what is a Mustang? A horse. What does a horse do? Get ridden by everyone and anyone that thinks they can have a ride, riding on my back, on my energy, on my story, on my history, on my essence, literally on my body at times, and on my core. So, I've taken great pride in calling myself Mustang Quay. Maybe it was a double entendre. Maybe it just means big white honky slut. I mean, who knows? I know that sounds terrible, but it just occurred to me this morning. I thought, I wonder if it was meant as a compliment at all. But I chose to take it as a compliment, and I chose to incorporate that part of Native American culture into my spirit, which calls out to be wild and free and ride through every storm and every sunset and every desert and every scarifying, agonizing, skin cancer, torturous, malfeasant horror, and every disappointment and every grief and every trauma. I have galloped across deserts and fields and meadows and highways to heaven and byways and descents into hell. I have traversed paradigms and multiverses, even in this physical body, while still alive as Tanya Desiree Aarons. So there is great power and honour and joy and delight in that. So that's my story. Love you all, including my former members of the Brisbane Jewish community. Those of you who still treat me with honour and decency and integrity to my face and behind my back, those few rare birds. And to those of you who still stab me at every opportunity, that says more about you than it does about me, darlings. And you helped create me to be the person I am today. Proud, happy, and free, and wild, and still have enough honour to put a stone on your grave and tell you that you were a jerk. And put a stone on the grave of those of my friends who've passed, who are greatly missed, and who are of blessed memory to this day. And live life in perfect equilibrium while hanging from the Ein Sof or by a thread with one tippy toe firmly planted on this planet Earth, because that is who we are ultimately. Spirit in physical bodies, trying to make sense of it all on our ride home. Love you all. Shabbat Shalom. May peace descend upon all Israel and upon all the world, and let us say, Amen.